Hey, nice crew neck.
Thank you.
My dad has a crew neck.
Guess we don't see many these days.
Back in my day, they were everywhere.
Good on you for getting your neck out there, you know. Why hide it?
Hey bro, my son has a turtleneck, so our necks look different. It's no problem.
I sometimes worry it makes my neck look small.
No, it looks big. Did you ever have a turtleneck? Or?
Oh yeah, of course, when I was a boy. Yeah, but my parents.
Male infant circumcision in Australia has a complex history, influenced by cultural, medical, and societal trends. Let's explore how this practice began, gained popularity, and then largely fell out of favour. Historically, a small number of Aboriginal nations circumcised, but most didn't. In fact, was largely unheard of outside of desert regions. Circumcision was equally unknown to early convicts and settlers. In the late 19th century, circumcision was introduced to Australia through Puritan influence. At the time, Puritan doctors promoted it as a solution for a wide range of health issues. Primarily, they wanted to discourage masturbation, a behaviour that was widely stigmatised. In the eyes of Puritans, retracting a foreskin to clean was a form of masturbation and had to be stopped. By the early 1900s, circumcision had become a common practice among Australian medical professionals. As diggers went to the First World War trenches, Puritan doctors said they would have to be circumcised for hygiene reasons. For many years, this led Australians to believe circumcision offered hygienic benefits, especially in an era when public health and education was still developing. After World War II, circumcision rates surged. Medical practitioners routinely recommended it for newborn boys, and the practice was widely accepted across Australian society. During this period, it was estimated that around 90% of Australian boys were circumcised. At the same time, Australia, a young nation with vast land and a small population, was looking for workers to fuel its growing industries and build its future. Meanwhile, Europe faced widespread devastation. Millions of people were displaced, and entire economies were struggling to rebuild. The Australian government launched the ambitious Populate or Perish campaign in the late 1940s. Initially focused on British migrants, the program offered affordable passage to Australia, famously nicknamed the £10 POM scheme. These new arrivals were promised a fresh start in a sunny land with boundless opportunities. Between 1947 and 1981, over 1 million Britons migrated to Australia under this scheme. For many, the promise of a new life was too good to pass up, though the reality wasn't always easy. Migrants often faced homesickness, cultural differences, and challenges adapting to Australia's unique climate and way of life, one of which was circumcision. In 1949, Cambridge paediatrician Dr. Douglas Gairdner published a landmark article in the British Medical Journal. Titled The Fate of the Foreskin, his work meticulously reviewed the medical evidence, or lack thereof, for routine circumcision. Gairdner concluded that the procedure was unnecessary for the vast majority of boys and posed risks, including bleeding, infection, and even death in rare cases. Gairdner's paper sent shockwaves through the British medical community. He argued that proper hygiene and medical treatment for conditions like phimosis were far safer and more effective than circumcision. His findings resonated with a growing number of doctors who saw medicine as a science and were beginning to question outdated practices which had no scientific basis. By the 1950s, circumcision rates in Britain sharply declined to almost nothing. Many doctors and hospitals stopped offering the procedure, citing Gairdner's research. Parents, too, were increasingly reluctant to consent to a surgery with no clear benefit for their children. Meanwhile, in Australia, routine circumcision was almost a rite of passage for newborn boys, particularly among Anglo-Saxon families. At its peak, nearly 80 to 90% of male infants were circumcised. British parents were reluctant to circumcise their sons because they had already learned it offered no clear benefit. Australian parents generally believed it was hygienic and prevented infections, while some simply followed the norm without question. As Britain's post-war population stabilised, Australia turned its focus to continental Europe. Agreements with countries like Italy, Greece, and later Eastern European nations brought waves of new immigrants. Many came to escape political unrest or economic hardship, bringing with them rich cultural traditions. Circumcision has always been extremely rare in Italy, Greece, and the non-Muslim regions of the former Yugoslavia. Medical professionals have only ever rarely recommended it only for specific conditions, such as severe phimosis. But by the 1970s, these demographic changes saw opinions move. The legacy of post-war migration is visible everywhere in Australia, from its vibrant cities to a thriving economy. British and European migrants laid the foundation for the nation we know today, including that most Aussie males today have a foreskin. At the same time, wider cultural attitudes were shifting, with growing respect for bodily autonomy and choice. In June 1970, 3 groundbreaking papers published in the Australian Paediatric Journal challenged the practice of routine circumcision. Dr. I.O.W. Leach, in his paper Circumcision, A Continuing Enigma, conducted a cost-benefit analysis. He concluded that the risks of complications far outweighed the potential benefits, advocating that circumcision be moved out of public healthcare systems and into private practices if requested for non-medical reasons. Dr. R.G. Birrell provided sobering evidence of the dangers. Over 6 years, he treated 9 infants who developed life-threatening septicemia after circumcision. His findings underscored the real risks of neonatal surgeries, even in sterile environments. A third paper, titled Another View of Circumcision, emphasised the lack of consistent advice for parents. The Australian medical community was clearly grappling with conflicting opinions and practices. This Australian debate occurred alongside growing international scrutiny. In September 1970, the Journal of the American Medical Association published Wither the Foreskin? A paper declaring no valid medical reason for neonatal circumcision. This became official policy for the American Academy of Pediatrics in 1971. Inspired by these developments, the Australian Paediatric Association released a policy in April 1971: newborn male infants should not, as a routine, be circumcised. This statement marked a turning point, urging Australian doctors to reframe circumcision as a cultural, not medical decision.
So one of the things, when I graduated, was the same. Everybody was done. And they used to say then, mother demands it, the doctor gets paid for it, and the baby doesn't have any say in it. And that was exactly what happens. I can remember 30 years ago when I started in medicine, the first patient I ever saw in accident emergency was a baby that was bleeding from a circumcision wound and nearly died because it lost so much blood. Anybody who says to you that it's a simple procedure, just a little bit of cream, you go clip, clip, let me tell you, it's mutilation and it's something that should be not reintroduced at all.
By the 1980s, Australian medical authorities, including the Royal Australasian College of Physicians, began advising against routine infant circumcision. Public health campaigns emphasised proper hygiene education instead, and the practice quickly declined. In the early 1980s, Anglo-Saxon parents in wealthier areas were the first to move away from the practice, geening immigrants and influenced by stronger opposition from medical organisations like the Australian College of Paediatrics. In 1985, neonatal circumcision was slated to be removed from the Medicare Benefits Schedule, MBS. Medical experts, including the Australian College of Paediatrics and the National Health and Medical Research Council, recommended its exclusion. They argued the procedure was non-essential, risky, and an unnecessary burden on public healthcare funds. Yet, this decision sparked an outcry, particularly from Australia's Jewish and Muslim communities, who viewed circumcision as a critical religious practice. Iconic Australian Prime Minister Bob Hawke, whose strong ties to Australia's Jewish community were well documented, personally intervened. He reversed the decision, ensuring circumcision remained eligible for public funding. His reasoning was as personal as it was political, reportedly telling colleagues, "If it's good enough for me, it's good enough for Medicare." Hawke's relationship with Australia's Jewish community ran deep, shaped by genuine strong friendships, visits to Israel, and a desire to atone for past actions. His connections also fueled speculation about political motivations, as his support from Melbourne's Jewish leaders became a cornerstone of his leadership. Attitudes toward circumcision have continued to evolve significantly since the 1980s decades, influenced by medical advice, cultural backgrounds, and socio-economic factors.
So what are you guys at home thinking about this? Should circumcision be banned, is the question we asked on our Facebook page. This is the answer from Alexia. Yes, unless it's for a medical reason. Stop cutting bits off babies. If a grown-up decides they want to do it, fine. But otherwise, they should definitely be banned.
Yeah.
This from Jason. If we banned circumcision, the boys that needed it done for medical reasons would be considered abnormal and suffer because of it. Lead the decision as a parental choice. And finally, why don't we just go ahead and ban every other medical procedure too? There's a chance that severe bleeding can happen with any procedure. It should always be a choice.
They don't chop the tails off dogs anymore. Do they? No, they don't. They did, but now they go, no. So if a dog is going to keep its tail, maybe boys should be keeping their foreskin.
I've got to say, someone who knew...
Two studies conducted around the turn of the millennium shed light on why parents choose to circumcise, or not, and how these decisions vary across the country. The first study, conducted in Western Australia, examined births during the 1990s. It found a striking trend. Families from poorer, more disadvantaged backgrounds were twice as likely to circumcise their sons compared to wealthier families. For example, in Melbourne, circumcision rates were about 12% in affluent eastern suburbs areas, but rose to 27% in working-class neighbourhoods such as Sunshine. In Sydney, a similar pattern emerged, though less pronounced. Wealthier suburbs, like the eastern suburbs, had lower circumcision rates compared to working-class areas such as Parramatta and Campbelltown. Brisbane's data revealed a different story, with a north-south divide influenced by cultural demographics rather than wealth.
Tonight, a parent's dilemma. The man who wants every baby boy circumcised.
Parents have got the responsibility to ensure what's best for their children.
He doesn't know it yet, but today's a very big day for 15-week-old Liam O'Loughlin and his doting parents, Jen and Chris.
Come on, let's have a look. Let's have a look.
They've decided to circumcise their child, a choice the majority of Australian parents don't make because it's long been considered medically unnecessary.
Hey, buddy.
Aren't you strong? We love our child very much, and we would never do anything to hurt him. We've made this decision because we feel it's in the best interest of our child, Liam's health now and in the future.
Yeah, I guess we sort of see it as another form of vaccination, I guess.
The second study, based in Port Macquarie, focused on births between 1999 and 2002. It found that circumcision was more common among younger, less educated parents and those with circumcised partners. Their decisions were often influenced by outdated beliefs about health benefits and social norms, such as wanting sons to look like dad. Parents who chose circumcision tended to profess religious faiths and were less aware of the risks associated with the procedure. By contrast, better educated parents were less likely to circumcise. They were more likely to base their decisions on modern medical evidence and awareness of the risks, rejecting the outdated justifications that once drove circumcision practices. The story of circumcision in Australia reflects broader societal changes. What was once a routine practice has become an exception, as medical advancements and shifting cultural norms continue to shape the choices of Australian families. Today, circumcision rates in Australia have dropped to around 6.8%, with the vast majority performed for cultural or religious reasons. Communities such as Muslims, South Pacific Islanders, Filipinos, and Jews account for most of the circumcisions performed, as cultural tradition rather than medical necessity drives the practice. The history of circumcision in Australia reflects broader shifts in medical science and cultural values. Today, parents make more informed decisions, guided by both medical advice, plus better online access to information from outside of their family and local community. The concept of personal autonomy has also become more significant in Australian society.
I am non-circumcised. Are you circumcised?
I'm circumcised.
And how's that working out for you?
Just fine.
Circumcised. Been cut off. What about you?
None. It's a mental, sexual abusing thing of power.
I never thought of it like that.
It is. It really is.
You knew who was circumcised and who wasn't because they were sort of excluded. It was quite a friendly school, but they were called cirky if they had a circumcision.
With experience like that,
It's no wonder Australian guys under 30 who are circumcised are twice as likely to have body issues about their penis than others the same age. We're here to help stop guys worrying and feel positive about what they've got. hoodieahelmet.weebly.com